joining us out of South Africa, Philasande Sixaba. He is a contributor, presenter, commentator from SuperSport. Welcome back to the show, mate.
Absolute pleasure, man. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Your lineup for this match, the Springbok lineup, is very, very strong. So obviously, clearly, the team is taking this match more than seriously. It's more than just a warm-up.
Yeah, more than just a warm-up. I don't think that any Springbok versus All Blacks test match has ever been a warm-up test match or a friendly test match. It's always serious business, and I think it's the last sort of chance for Jacques Nienaber and the Springbok coaches to really get everybody on board and try and get as many minutes out of some of the key players that are in that starting lineup. So it's a great opportunity for so many of those players to make a real big claim for that starting position for that opening game against Scotland. So I think it's a great opportunity for the players, especially against the All Blacks, to test themselves ahead of that opening match.
I'm going to go through one or two players here because you've lost some to injury. A centre, a lock. Your first 500, Pollard, obviously, of course. You're welcome back, Kolisi. We'll get onto that in a second. But Martin Devlin is the pivot with the number 10 jersey. Tell us about this man.
Well, he's an exciting kind of fly-off. You know, he brings something very much different to a Handré Pollard. He's a very much ball in hand kind of first five. I think a lot of things that the South African public sort of moan about is inconsistency from the kicking tee, and I think that's something that he'll improve on as he gets more minutes in Test match rugby. I think he's about 8 Test matches in now, and he's really just stood up in terms of his attacking play. He's got a really good defensive play as well. So for me, he's one of those guys where you look at him from a point that he gets the Springboks going, particularly when they have a strong pack like they have against New Zealand this coming Friday. So you can expect a lot of some fast play coast to coast from a guy like Manie Lebok, and he's got a really good thinking brain inside him. You know, he knows when to attack, he knows when to kick and vary his play. So very much an exciting prospect.
How easy is it to replace to replace De Jager, to replace him in the side? You know, we look at it in terms of a parallel here in New Zealand, and if we lost Mwanga, we lost one of our centre pairings, say Geordie Barrett, we lost one of our very experienced champion locks, say a Brodie Retallick. Replacing those three players, not easy, and you saw it when the All Blacks played the Wallabies in Dunedin, that the second tier of players aren't at that level. So how easy for you guys to slip new players in those positions?
It's basically your spine of your team, isn't it, mate? I think it's very hard to replace those guys. I mean, those are key positions. Handré Pollard, Lukhanyo Lood de Jager in the 5 jersey. Very, very difficult to try and replace. But I think we're in a fortunate position in South Africa that we've got a lot of depth, particularly at lock. So a loss to a Lood de Jager doesn't feel as monumental as it would if it was something that wasn't, sort of prepared for. You know, we've got so many quality replacements or like-for-like players in that position. Archie Snyman, Franco Mostert, Eben Etzebeth, Marvin Ori, Ron Klein now that has come about since making his Test debut and switching allegiance from Ireland to South Africa. So that's the beauty about South Africa at the moment, particularly in a position like lock, is that we've got plenty of depth. The centers is something a little bit different. I think the loss of Lukhanyo is felt a little bit bigger because of the quality of player that he is, and to try and replicate that quality is pretty difficult. We've got experience in Jesse Creel, who's played over 60 Test matches, but you kind of miss out on the X factor that a Lukhanyo brings to that 13 jersey. So that's probably the position that Jacques Nienaber probably gives him small headaches about, but it's good to have a guy like Jesse Creel now to fill in that position, particularly with the experience that he has. And I think at flyoff, that's probably one of the other sort of positions where Jacques Nienaber probably scratches his head a little bit more than the others. Mani Leboka stepped up nicely. We've got different options because a guy like Damian Willems can play at 10. There've been, sort of talk of Cheslin Cobley slotting at 10 at some time. He's done it for club in France. So it's kind of difficult to replace those kind of players, the frontline players in Pollard and De Jager, but we're in a fortunate position that we've got a bit of depth in some positions, and then some positions, the X factor of a Mani Leboka still sort of gets us through test matches. So pretty difficult, but I think there are bases that have been covered, particularly in those positions.
Philasande Sixaba is with us, presenter, commentator, analyst for SuperSport South Africa, and we'll be doing that all through the World Cup. This is the platform. All right, your captain, Siya Kolisi, comes back, and I heard Lachlan talking to you about this before we started the interview. It's just what a remarkable recovery story this is. He looks as though he has never been away.
It's actually a miracle, because an ACL injury, it's a year out of rugby, and he's recovered in 4 months. It's an actual, it's a bleak blessing to have a guy like Siya Kolisi back from injury. He contributes so much, not only from a leadership point of view, but a lot of what South Africa want to play goes through a guy like Siya Kolisi. If you look at, the attacking rucks that he secures and makes sure that there's clean ball for the other forwards to carry from, clean ball for the backs to try and attack from. A lot of that work comes through Siya Kolisi, and we saw it against Wales at the Principality Stadium this past weekend, and his effectiveness in just 40 minutes that he played at the Principality. So it's a huge boost for South Africa to have a guy like Siya Kolisi back, not only from a leadership point of view, but the game plan that South Africa want to play goes through a guy like Siya Kolisi, and making sure that he gives the platform that the Mani Leboka can use, the Ebenezabets can get front foot ball and really try and run on hard and bring about that physicality. So a lot of the dirty work, the donkey work that he does goes very much unseen, but it's a huge part of South Africa's game plan, and to have him back is fantastic for the Springboks.
A couple of quick questions before we let you go. We always thank you so much for your time. Look, just looking down your team sheet, and you've got players playing obviously in England, you've got players playing in France, you've got players playing in Japan. Is there any worry about the standard of rugby that any of these guys are playing? I mean, it's a question that we wrestle with here in New Zealand all the time about letting our players go and play overseas and still selecting them. It doesn't seem to be an issue with you guys. How do you know that if a guy, for example, like Malcolm Marx, who's playing in Japan, or Peter Steph Dutoy playing in Japan, the standard of that rugby is not test match rugby? So how confident can you be of those guys being up to speed?
It's difficult. I think it's a difficult question to try and answer because of the different standards the different competitions have. Top 14 players will probably go through a lot more physical load than your Japanese league players. So it's kind of difficult to try and replicate test match level standards in those kind of leagues. But I know the Springboks keep tabs on all those players. It's a huge pool of players that play outside of South Africa. So Felix Jones's role was crucial in terms of getting in touch with those guys that play their football outside of South Africa. So it's difficult, but I think South Africa have tried and to put measures in place to make sure that those guys have the required loads to slot back into test match rugby without too much difficulty. It's always going to be a question that pops up because of the level of physicality and the standard that those leagues have. But I think South Africa have managed it pretty well.
I love it when you say a Friday night because, of course, I don't know why, but here in New Zealand, we always think you're on the same time zone. But it's Saturday morning, early Saturday morning our time. Crazy time to be watching a rugby test, isn't it? When's the last time we watched it on a Friday night for you? I can't remember a Saturday morning for New Zealand.
I've never seen a Springbok New Zealand test match on a Friday night. So it's going to be a bit different for South African public as well to watch the Springboks play, especially in Twickenham, at 8:30 kickoff this side. So it's going to be quite difficult and different from a South African point of view. But I think it's good. South Africans love their rugby. They'll stay up. Even if it's a midnight kickoff, it's a huge clash between the Springboks and New Zealand. Wherever they play, whatever time they play, there'll always be eyeballs on it.
Look, thank you so much again for your time. We look forward to locking horns this weekend, and we'll be in touch, obviously, ahead of those World Cup openers. Big match for the All Blacks against France, and also a huge match for you guys against Scotland. So thanks once again for joining us, mate.
Always a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Devlin.
Down goes Fraser. Down goes Fraser.
The platform.